Okay, so welcome to the session today. We are going to talk about doing unscalable things when you start out with your startup and why it's important, and why you it's a necessary part of a startup. So without further ado, I'm going to start a video. It's about a 20-minute video. It's two of the sort of managing partners at Y Combinator, which is a Silicon Valley-based startup. They're talking about why you need to do unscalable things and what it's all about, etc., etc. And then I'll take another 10 minutes or so just to talk about the concept and sort of bring it home. But without further ado, let's do it. They say probably much better than I'll be able to say it in half an hour. So I'm going to get that started. There we go. I'm just going to mute everybody. There's some music playing. I don't know. Pule, is it your music playing?
I think it's mine.
No way, I'll just mute you. It's fine. No worry. Here we go.
Remember on my first test drive cruise that I'll never forget is we're driving down 101 and Kyle says, "Oh, a shadow. Let's see how the car handles that." And I was like, "Oh shit, Kyle." Hey, this is Michael Seibel with Dalton Caldwell, and today we're going to talk about what does it really mean to do things that don't scale. This term was massively popularized in a PG essay from 2013, but it was advice that he'd been giving YC founders for a really long time. But Dalton, it seems like a lot of founders get this confused.
Doing things that don't scale is doing something that's provocatively manual on your part, where you, the founder, does a thing personally and that isn't counting on a lot of code that you're writing or scalable processes to run how you think late stage companies are run.
Might help for us to give some examples.
Let's give examples.
Reddit. So day one, Reddit exists, site, no links, just
no users,
blank page, but like click a button to submit a link. What do you do if you're Steve and Alexis?
So the scalable solution is you first launch subreddits, then you run ads to recruit people to come sign up for Reddit on different topics. And then then you would hire an influencer. You have an influencer strategy to get influencers on various topics to come moderate the subreddits. Okay. And so that the day you launch, you have this big splashy launch with hundreds of thousands of signups, right? That scales.
That scales. What Steve and Alexis did was they made a little tool that allowed them to submit a link, the same thing that normal users used, but they had a little extra field where they could put in a username. And they just started inventing different usernames and submitting links like them. So day one, when they emailed this to their 6 friends, it looked like there was a page full of users, when in fact there were 2 users. And I remember Steve tells 2 stories. The first day someone else other than them submitted a link, which was not day one. And then he tells another story where I think he went out and he got drunk, and the next morning he had forgotten to load up this morning's fake links, and he thought the site would just be blank, and he was so pissed at himself. But then he opens up the site and it looked like there were enough other people submitting links that the site wasn't blank. And then he was and that might have been 20 or 30 people, right? And he's like, "Oh wow, major milestone." What was the DoorDash story, Dalton?
Well, look, when you think about something like food delivery, you imagine a scaling. You want to be doing hundreds of orders a day, and so the way the founders got started was they just did all the deliveries themselves. They didn't have to hire anyone or build a driver app or recruit drivers. If someone made an order via DoorDash, if some miracle happened and someone made an order, the founders would drop everything and go deliver the food. Right? That was actually how they got started. Go ahead.
What's so cool about that is that, one of the other topics in this essay is delight your users, right? Well, the easiest way to delight your user when you're doing food delivery is you to deliver yourself, right? You race to the freaking restaurant, you make sure you get the right thing, you throw in an extra, you deliver it yourself, you say thank you. They didn't have to deal with managing a driver network, motivating him. It's like, just did it
And
themselves.
think about all the other ancillary benefits where they got to see why it was hard to do the deliveries. They got to talk to the restaurant owners personally and develop a relationship with them. They got to talk to their users. They'd be like, hey, here's your burrito. I'm the founder of this company. Do you like it? Would you order again? Isn't that funny? Like, could you imagine a more lower status thing than, of course not, but that's why it was awesome. It was not scalable. It is, in present day, if you order from DoorDash, Tony is not going to deliver your burrito, or he might statistically. He still does this sometimes. I'm sure everyone saw the news. He still does this to this day. The founders still do deliveries. But like that was not a scalable strategy. But man, that's how they got off the ground.
I think the last example, in light of Cruise, Cruise this week started to allow the general public to drive in a safety driver-free, driverless car. And I remember when Cruise was in YC, and the V1 of the driverless car, Kyle and his tiny team built in 3 months. They retrofitted an Audi. To call it driverless would be an overstatement. There were a couple of things I remember. One, there was a big red button on the floor in the driver's seat, and Kyle never explained what that button did. But it was clearly important and very easy for him to reach. Number two, it only works on the highway. Number three, it was basically adaptive cruise control. Like it was basically cruise control that stayed in your lane. It wasn't more fancy than that. And then number four, the moment I remember on my first test ride on Cruise that I'll never forget is we're driving down 101 and Kyle says, "Oh, a shadow. Let's see how the car handles that." And I was like, "Oh shit, Kyle." Out of everything I was looking out for, like curves, other drivers, signs, I didn't know that I should be afraid of the shadow. And that was V1. That was V1. And Google had cars on the road retrofitted with all kinds of fancy equipment at that time. And Kyle had his Audi that couldn't deal with shadows. That's how it starts. So why don't you talk a little bit more viscerally, Dalton? What is we've given some examples, but give us more on what do you think the life and the job of a CEO in these stages, and these do things that don't scale pre-product market fit stages?
Yeah, I think in the do things that don't scale philosophy, the job of the CEO and the job of the co-founders is to do the shittiest, worst, low status work you can think of. It's the opposite of whatever your mental model when someone says the word CEO and you're like, oh wow, CEO, visionary, powerful. It's like, no, like you're like doing the shit work.
Yes.
And you've got to learn to love and embrace the shit work. That is your job at a pre-product market fit startup, is to actually make everything happen and to be personally accountable for making the entire system run end to end. And we just see so many founders that think it's their job to be like at the late stage, they're emulating what they think Elon Musk is like, or, Mark Zuckerberg or something. But when you're a really small startup, it's the exact opposite in every way.
This thing that came to mind is, we talk to a lot of smart people who aren't cut out to be founders. I think the reason why is that smart people don't tend to want to do shit work. And it's like a special kind of person who's smart, but who's like, no, like I'll get in my car and go pick up that order. Or like, no, like I will hand figure out how to build this horrible motor to move a car wheel. Like I'm going to get into the guts. And most smart people just don't want to do that, especially if they can get jobs where they don't have to.
Think about how much, for most of our founders, their actual job is answering customer support emails and talking to angry, irate people that hate them and are like, I hate you. like you're dealing with like up close and personal feedback because you're a tiny startup, right? There's no one else to yell at. And so every time like DoorDash screwed up an order, the founders of DoorDash would have to be like, I am very sorry. We will do better. Like
you're the front lines.
That's not fun.
Yeah. I love that. I love that because sometimes founders want to put other people on the front lines, and it's like, God, like no, like you are the front lines.
But it's more scalable. Again, and again, we're not trying to be facetious. It is more scalable if the founders could spend their time on other tasks, right? That's more scalable. But if you're doing things that don't scale, you embrace the suck, right? You give it a hug. You're like, yes, I love doing this horrible work.
Yes.
That is what actually doing things that don't scale is.
Well, and then to your point, you learn. You learn what other people are unwilling to learn. So you build a better product. And so you serve your customers better. And especially when you're dealing with incumbents, you better believe that their senior management team isn't out on the front line. So whoever's developing the product there, they have some researcher or some outsourced person doing all this customer surveys and crap. And if you're on the front line, you'll learn 10 times more than they will. What about your friends who are making fun of you? Because you're doing this shit work. You tell your friends what you're doing. You know, they work at Google, they get free food and free laundry and Google Bus. And they're like, what are you, you're hand delivering food? Like you're hand adding links to your own link sharing website? Like how do you get over the know-it-alls telling you like you are an idiot? That's not how it works. I know how it works. I work at Google.
Well, you are an idiot because you started a company. No, just kidding. Like this is what comes with the territory, friends. Like if it were easy to start a company and anyone could quit their job at Google and just magically have product market fit and be successful, way more people would do it. Like how many Googles are there in the world? Not many. And it's because there's this this stage screens out most people because it sucks. Right?
Yeah.
It sucks hard.
Yeah.
And so most people look at this and they're like, I have to do what? And then most likely I'll fail and I'll go broke, whereas I could keep my high status job. This screens everybody out. This is why there are not more successful founder. Like the reason why there's not more startups in the world is not because there's lack of good ideas or innovation, or I would argue even funding. It's basically there aren't enough people that really want to do this stage of the startup and are good at it.
Now, let's talk about this kind of, we keep on bringing Google. Let's go with this phenomenon. I see so many young founders basically saying, like, before I start a startup, I need to work at a big company. That's where I'm going to learn how to do it. Do you think Google's going to help? Or how do you think it helps and how do you think it hurts? Because I think it's more nuanced than just one or the other.
To set the scene, if you've ever interviewed for like a programming position at Google or Facebook or Amazon, a lot of what they have you do is design algorithms that ideally are scalable algorithms, right? Like ideally you're not, bubble sorting on the whiteboard during your interview at Google, right? And so it gets ground into you during the selection process that your job is to design solutions that scale. And when you're inside of a big tech company, you're rolling things out to millions or tens of millions of people. And so you're beat into your head that only scalable solutions are good solutions, right? Like if Facebook had some new feature, but it required them to buy 100 times more servers, which would bankrupt the company, guess what would happen to your bright idea? Can't do it. It's got to be more scalable, right? Or like, so every single product idea or feature that you build inside these companies is viewed through the lens of scalability, and rightfully so. You still with me?
Yes.
Now, this is what's funny if you think of these jobs as training for startups, is that now you've had deeply ingrained into your brain what I would argue is not helpful at the early stages. This is helpful when you make it to late stage, hallelujah, right? But the early stages, you just got immersed in a culture that is not helpful. Versus if you never worked at one of these companies and you just like graduated college, no one ever told you to worry about scalability. You're like, yeah, cool, whatever. Like, I wrote the algorithm with a bubble sort. That's okay, right? like you've never been yelled at by your boss because you came up with unscalable ideas.
You want to be trained at doing just enough as opposed to doing perfect job. And like the startup needs to do just enough and Google needs to do way better than just enough. And I think that like what's hard for me is that sometimes you see those founders and they can't launch. They're like, oh, something's broken, or oh, a customer didn't like this, and they just like cannot bring themselves to launch because it's not perfect.
Well, think about it. If you're at Google and you launch a new feature, or if you're at Facebook and you launch a new feature and it doesn't scale, like if it doesn't work, that's a fail. Like, congratulations, you suck, and your team sucks, right? Like, and again, like, they're not wrong, but like all the incentive structure is set up to not launch a feature that is not scalable. This is where that scalable word comes in, right? You're not helping the company.
So one thing I think is helpful is like, how do we help founders prepare their minds for this zone? And we're telling you it's going to suck. We're telling you to do things that people are going to make fun of you. We're telling you that you might have to live in this spot for a while before things start looking better. I think that the big challenge the founders make is screwed up expectations. Like the big challenge is that founders think I launch it and then it's going to work. And I really wish founders went in with the mindset like, I don't care if it takes 2 years to work. Like how do you set your mind up so that you're immediately not disappointed? Because I think that it's like, we talk about this at YC all the time. Maintaining motivation is like 3/4 of this game.
I think this is a great question. And it's funny how much the questions, like if someone got to spend time with us, Michael, say someone went to dinner with us, what they want to ask us about is like fundraising, networking with, I know exactly what people would want to talk to us about, but usually what you should be asking us to talk about is like emotional well-being and maintaining motivation and dealing with high stress situations and dealing with criticism. Like a lot of people aren't prepared for people on the internet criticizing them. It's hard, right? Yep. And so it's funny how much what people think expertise, like what they think they want help with and what they actually need help with are not the same thing.
Yes.
And think about how many startups that we fund die basically because the founders run out of gas and get sad and want to go back to their jobs at Google because this was not what they thought it was.
Man, motivation, I don't think motivation is about how shitty something is, right? Like, I think it's about how shitty did you think it was going to be when you started? I think that's what screws your motivation. It's like, how shitty did you think it was going to be when it was started? That's why, honestly, when I do talks to college kids now, I'm just like, this life sucks. Like, this is the first thing out of my mouth. It's like, this life sucks. It's like getting punched in the face every day. And like real face punch, like not like fake. It's like, you ever get punched in the face, you remember that shit for like the rest of your life. That is like not
to this day, I'm sure you do too. Man, I have like bad dreams about my startups. I still have like, it's not like we're insulated from this. This was hard. This was like the hardest shit we ever did.
Yes, by far. And we probably will ever do. So, to kind of wrap this up, right? Like, this idea of do things that don't scale, one, it's going to be counterintuitive. Two, expect people around you to not understand.
And to actively think you're stupid. Like, not just not understand, but actively tell you, you're being an idiot. Like, why are you delivering burritos? Like, what on earth are you thinking? Like, you're making they'll like stage an intervention for you. You're screwing up. Your friends will come together. They'll set you down and be like, what are you doing, man? This is a mistake. This is not what you should be doing.
Expect it to look way different than what your larger competitors are doing now. Expect it to look way different. And expect yourself to be the primary actor. You're not acting through others. You are the doer. Anything else to add, though? To wrap this up?
I think if you look at other companies that raise a lot of money, you're inclined to copy that strategy of what they're doing. So again, if you see all these companies are doing, 10-minute delivery, right? Like that's the hot new thing. And so they're like, oh, this company raised 50 million. I better raise 50. Do things that don't scale is cool. Yeah, not for you. Go do one delivery. Like when I see people fail a lot, it's that they want to get 1,000 customers and they can't get one. Just being able to say one, we've delivered one burrito separates you from the pack.
Yes.
And so again, maybe this is an inspiring thing. Actually doing something is much better than average. Congratulations, you're in the top half of startup founders if you can get out of your own way enough to do one thing.
To extend that, and if you can get that person to do it again, they enjoyed it enough the customer enjoyed your product enough the first time that they're going to use it again. Because that's the other question. Oh, we have a ton of users. Like, how often do they come back? It's like, come back? Were we supposed to be were we supposed to be measuring that?
Was that on the test? I didn't study for that one.
It's like, well, okay. All right. That's two things that don't scale. don't just take our word for it, though. The essay's online. You can read it. And trust me, you'll get a lot out of it if you just go read it. So Google search, do things that don't scale, PG, and I'm sure you'll get the link in the top. All right. See you later, Dalton.
Okay, there we go. So I think they sort of explained it very well. And I think it carries a lot of weight, what they were saying, because both of them, those two guys, came through massive startups. The guy on the bald guy started a company called Twitch, which is a massive online sort of streaming platform for gamers. So he started, I think it was called Justin TV when he started it, and it morphed into Twitch, which is, if you Google Twitch, you'll see it's a massive company. So they know what they're talking about. But the fundamentals of what they were saying, and then the principles of what they were saying is basically, when you start out, you need to cram as much information and experience and setbacks and almost emotion into your mind, into your brain, pertaining to your specific startup. You need to do as much of what is needed in your startup to go from 0 to 1 yourself. And that's something that a lot of founders can't wrap their heads around, because it does take longer. It does take longer to get off the runway then and have liftoff. It does take longer in the sense that when you do things that don't scale, you'll feel out of your depth, for a long time, and you will feel like you're not spending your time well. But every time you have an experience, like you said, the DoorDash guys delivering the burritos themselves. Every time you have an experience like that, or you meet a customer, or customers, has a complaint or whatever, every time that happens, you sort of strengthen the foundation of your startup, because you are the battery for your startup as a founder. You are that battery that drives your startup. So you need to have all of these sort of experiences and emotions and go through, the actual work, that your startup will require to build that solid foundation. And if you skip the process, I don't think they really spoke about that, but if you do skip the process, what normally happens is the foundation and sort of the emotional battery that is you as a startup founder, it just runs out too quickly, because you do bond with your startup idea in a sense, when you go through tough times with your idea. So doing unscalable things really does create that bond between yourself and your startup. So when times get tough down the line, you've got that emotional bond with your startup, and it really does help to carry you through the tough times. I want to show everybody just before we finish, just a quick graph. Some of you might have seen it, but I think it sort of adds to what they were saying. Let me just put it up here. It's just an image. There we go. Just gonna open it up so everybody can see it. Hold on a sec. It's an image, and it sort of explains what a startup process is all about, and where most startups go. Let me just see if it shares this. There we go. All right. So that is basically the unscalable things that you do. Okay, this is a startup a life cycle. And if you look down here, they talk about in that video about the essay of PG, which is Paul Graham. So Paul Graham actually made this graph as well. So this is a happiness sort of axle, and on this side, this is a timeline. So what happens with your startup is this is before your startup. This is just figuring out the idea and what you're going to do, and that's cool. And then you get that initial enthusiasm, which is your happiness is very high. You think you're going to change the world with your startup, but you need to start to put in the work. So doing unscalable things normally happens in this area here, experimenting and pivoting, and it might go all the way through to product market fit, where you do unscalable things. All right. And they call it the trough of sorrow. So, and that's why they said in that video, a lot of founders just sort of pack up and leave, in this process, because this trough of sorrow is, when you're coming out of a high paying job, this is just too hard for a lot of founders. And the happiness is just too low, and they can't see themselves, doing this forever. But when you do go through this process and you experiment, you pivot, and things start to work, and there's an uptick, and you get to product market fit eventually. Now, when you get to that, you can get to a place where you can scale up. Okay. But until you scale up and you reach, this upper sort of marker here at the top, you will do a lot of things yourself. Okay. And that's okay. It should be like that. Somewhere around here, you'll start to employ people, and they'll help you, but you still be very, very hands-on. And then when you do scale up and you do become a fully fledged business, then the game changes a little bit. But be prepared for this trough of sorrow and doing things that are not scalable in order to learn and to build that solid foundation. Okay. Here we go. All right. So just to wrap up again, if you feel like when you're working on your startup, if you feel like you're doing things that are not scalable and you can't see yourself doing what you're doing now for the rest of your business's life cycle, then that's okay. Keep on doing it. The reason why doing it is you want to bring in as much experience, emotion, feedback, hard yards and whatever into your brain, your mental library. You want to bring that into your mental library so that you can build a solid foundation for your startup. And when you do figure things out and your product market fit is there, then you've got that solid foundation and you know what you're talking about when you start to employ people. You can inspire them to help you grow your startup. Okay. So that is why you need to do unscalable things, why it's important to know that, when things suck and it doesn't feel like this is what startup life should be about. It's okay. Just continue on and keep that ultimate goal in mind, and do these unscalable things. I promise you, I've been through it myself. It does lead to a better outcome eventually. Okay. Okay, everybody. We're over time again. I'll share this with everybody again. If you do have questions, you're welcome to email me. I'm getting into my emails again. I think I'm behind on about 150 emails, but I'm getting into it again today. Yeah, we can take it from here. Gareth, you're welcome to set up a session, and we can chat if you want as well. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Buzz. I think I'll drop you a message and I'll catch you up on everything, and we can maybe pick up where we left off. Thanks, Balsa. Thanks for today.
All right, awesome, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.
Awesome, man. We'll talk.
Yeah,
we'll talk then. Eh? Cheers, everyone.
you.
Yes, Christelle.
Sorry, where do we find these videos if we want to go back? Because I feel like today I was a bit distracted.
Okay, no worries.
And I just want to review what I've
Absolutely
been looking at.
Yeah, I'm gonna, as soon as it's it's available on my hard drive, my server, my Google server, I'll share it with you. So there is a recording. Yeah, you can check your inbox. I shared last week's as well. If you want to review it, but definitely, yeah, I'll share it with you again. Okay.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Cheers, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.